Curt, you've made a very interesting presentation to the Central Illinois Marketing Club, combining the sale of corn with the purchase of fertilizer. Basically, you've labeled it protecting your margin. How does all of this work?
Well, I've bought fertilizer for 17 years, been a fertilizer buyer of some magnitude for 17 years. And when you look at purchasing fertilizer to sell to a farmer, there's always that gap between grain and fertilizer. And a lot of times they follow each other, right? Well, that gap's a grower's margin. And they need to do everything they can to protect that and keep as much of that as possible. Really what sparked this is when you go back to last August, when really nitrogen was very favorable to the farmer compared to the grain price. And 80+% of the fall anhydrous was purchased before September, before harvest, and 20% of the grain was sold, and a lot of opportunity was missed out. And we need to be more transparent as an industry to help growers capitalize that when they can.
How does one do this? What do they look at? They've got to look at the price of grain and the price of fertilizer, but how do you rationalize the two?
So we've got charts that go back 17 years, and you look at we're looking at how many bushels it takes to buy a ton of each crop nutrient. And then we've got charts that show the averages for the last 17 years, the last 5 years, or last year. And you're looking at averages, and when it gets below those averages, that's a buy signal for me, or it should be for the farmer just the same. But so when you're looking at those concepts and you're buying fertilizer based off a grain price, okay? And you're looking at those charts, anytime you get below the averages of a 5-year average, okay, of how many bushels it takes to buy a ton of each crop nutrient, that should be a buy signal for a farmer. But they also need to sell the grain to lock in that margin and keep that margin to themselves.
What if the grain is not at an advantageous selling price?
Well, and it goes both ways. So what if the fertilizer is above the average, but it's time to spread? It's the same. It's not always going to work as planned, but when it does is when a grower needs to take advantage of it.
Okay, so farmers will typically look at grain prices. They're doing that every day, every hour.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't really know what the price of fertilizer is until they call you or your colleagues around the country and say, what's the cost of nitrogen?
Correct. And that's something I think we need to do better as an industry about being more. I mentioned, there's a lot of times we don't have a price of every crop nutrient every day just because we don't have the opportunity to buy at that certain time, so therefore we can't give a price to a grower. That happens. As an industry, we need to do a better job of being able to give a grower a price daily so they can take advantage of it when they want to.
Okay, they're used to grain is sold every day, every hour. It's a publicly traded commodity.
Correct.
And there's always somebody who will sell and somebody who will buy to offset each other. But fertilizer, you're going to buy it, but there may be, you may hedge it, but there's not necessarily somebody every day on the other side that would take the opposite position.
That is correct. So fertilizer is not as liquid as grain. There's not always a buyer on the other side if you're in a paper contract situation on fertilizer to basically buy you out of your contract. And there's times it can be a bad situation to where, if myself or anybody that buys fertilizer that has paper contracts that wants to get out and they can't. The fertilizer is just not as liquid as grain.
How does some farmer know what the cost of fertilizer is other than calling their retailer and saying, what is the price today, and may not be able to get it? How is he or she going to know what the advantage may be?
Really, so we send the data out to our salespeople every week so that they can show that to their growers and keep them in tune to what the market is today. And we do that. We try to do it every Monday or Tuesday every week, and then the salespeople communicate that to their customers. That's how we're doing it today.
Okay.
There is a chance down the road that we may put it on our website, but for now we want our salespeople to be the heroes in that arena.
Okay, now we're you're talking about the retail price.
Correct.
Are there wholesale prices out there that are generally publicly available?
Yes, you can look up online, you can look up a NOLA bid for fertilizer online.
And that's going to have some indication of whether it's high or low.
Correct.
Compared to what it was the prior year or the prior month.
That is correct.
Okay. And so it's going to take a little work for somebody to make this work, but it could work to their advantage.
That is correct.